Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you're here. Sorry for a little bit of producer error here. I'm still getting used to new format and OBS, but thank you for being here. I'm so grateful that you're here for this daily medicine transmission for February 2nd. 2021. It is IMBOLC, the Gaelic pagan holiday of IMBOLC. And what does that signify? Well, we are halfway through the winter, and it's also Groundhog's Day. So we are at the halfway point between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. And so this particular celebration is meant to recognize that, to celebrate it, and to also focus on the feminine and the goddess. And so this is also known as Bridget's or Saint Bridget's Day, because it is the feminine principle that is the most apparent right now in the stillness of the winter, in the darkness of the winter, because this aspect is equally important to the process of spiritual alchemy and creation. So we're going to talk a lot about that today in this transmission. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the astrology. There is some written content on all my social media platforms. You can access them from the description box below if you're interested and you really connect to reading material as well. I love to write, and so I've been really cranking out a lot more material, and it helps organize my thoughts. And so sometimes that is also a good way to get information. So you can connect to all those platforms in the description box below. So it's also Groundhog's Day, and it's so interesting that IMBOLC and Groundhog's Day, it's not even that interesting. I mean, Groundhog's Day is a ridiculous holiday that is basically signifying the same exact thing. We are halfway through the process of the winter, and this poor groundhog is shoved in front of everybody to make a prediction about whether or not we will get early spring or 6 more weeks of winter. Well, in the reality, the season, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, is we will get 6 more weeks of winter, regardless of how the climate seems to participate in that process. And Punxsutawney is actually a town in Pennsylvania, in Western Pennsylvania. I went to college very, very close to Podunk, Punxsutawney. This is really the only thing going for that town, unfortunately, is Punxsutawney Phil and Groundhog's Day. So it's really no stretch to think that if we even want to, personify Punxsutawney Phil came out of his hole and saw an entire foot of snow and said, yeah, we got 6 more weeks of winter going on here. It's really not that hard to assess. And as I'm looking out my window right now, I also am seeing at least a solid foot of snow. So, but that doesn't mean that we don't have the ability to anticipate the cycles that unfold naturally. That is something that we can rely upon, is the natural law and cosmic law unfolding and our participation in it. So I have my farm clothes on because this is the way that I'm looking forward to the spring. I got land, and I am ready to use it now. And so there might be a foot of snow outside, but I am mentally and spiritually and energetically preparing for the growing season to be upon us sooner than later. So it's an interesting day, and we have a moon in Libra. And I wrote a lot about this, actually, because as much as Libra is about the balance in our relationships that we want to be in, it's equally as about the relationships that we don't necessarily want to be in, but find ourselves in anyway. So legal contracts are a big part of the Libran archetype as well. And the balance in, with people that we would not consider our friends or our loved ones from a material perspective. In fact, Libra and the archetype of Libra and the scales of justice is just as much to do about the balance with us and our quote unquote enemies as it is with balance in our relationships that we want to be in. And so this is it can be very contentious. If you've ever been in legal proceedings, contractual business contracts, that can get really contentious. Even a marriage that is dissolving can be very contentious. And the thing about Libra, the sword suit in the tarot is never really that great, is it? Most of the imagery, for the most part, is something that causes a lot of pain and sorrow and is sharp and without feeling. And so in Libra, we apply our knowledge in order to create an adjustment or a balance. And in this case with the moon, we do add our emotions into the whole situation. And that can work against us and it can work for us. And we're going to see in this transmission as I go through it that there is two sides of a moon in Libra, in terms of how our intuition and our emotional power can be used as an asset, and how it also can allow us to be more sensitive than maybe necessary in order to come to a very firm balance and use our logic and rationality. So Moon and Libra people, wow, I love them so much, but they will tend to do whatever it takes in order to please people in their relationships and use their emotional sensitivity sometimes can work against them in terms of, everything is fair as long as it's fair for everybody else, and oftentimes will not take into account their own sovereignty in the situation or how it impacts them. So just a little bit about the Libra archetype and the moon in Libra. Of course, we have all of the Aquarian energy. We have Mercury retrograde in Aquarius today. And Venus has moved into the 2nd degree of Aquarius. And this is an unexpected thunderstorm. I really feel like today, as much as we can rely on the cycles of nature, and this is a really good place to put our trust and reliance and our focus, it's also important to realize for everything that we as humans and our technology is able to create in a civilization, nature is able to take away in a hot second. And with Venus, she rules Libra, and she also rules Taurus. And so this could also just expect the unexpected when it comes to our values, our resources, the actual contractual arrangement in our relationships as well. It's important that we are prepared for that. And that is the measure of a healthy collective in society, just as much as being able to institute all of these technological innovations for the sake of cohesion. So it's going to be an interesting day. And that movie Groundhog's Day, honestly, is a very good, it's worth watching just because it's ridiculous and hilarious, but it also shows how karma really works and how we will go over it and over it until we get it right. And Libra, for as much as it has to do with our relationships, even the contentious ones, it also has to do with the relationship to ourselves and the polar opposite aspect that is very first shown to us with the Gemini archetype, which is where the North Node is. So you can see there is it's loose, but there is a grand air trine with the sun and the moon in Libra and the North Node today. So we can use our logic, our rationality, we can apply our knowledge of balance to really take a quantum leap in our evolution, especially when it comes to where we are collectively headed for our soul's evolution. But, it's not with the moon here. It's important to realize that we can still utilize our intuition and our emotional sensitivity in this process as well. The idea of spiritual alchemy is that we can't really bypass the aspect of darkness if we want to stand in truth. And there is a still point that Libra does represent, at least halfway through the sign, that is a respite period or a rest and a recuperation. It's that moment where we have to kind of gather in all of our resources in order to find balance. And there is a point outside of the application. Libra is cardinal air. There's movement and momentum. There's an application of our knowledge in order to achieve this balance. This is where justice and the law come in, because we have to apply this. But there's also a point where we have to kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say step back, but yes, absolutely step back and find the 0 point of balance before we, in our transfiguration process, before we move forward. And that is really strong today. And this means also kind of going within as well. And as we'll see in the transmission, that is a really big part of what we're going to be addressing, is the withdrawal into the inner world and through the digging down into the deeper layers. And I keep saying this over and over. And so it's a theme that is not going away. And in fact, with Mercury retrograde, and as I just, I'm discovering all these, astrology especially is a constant journey of discovery about how all of these celestial objects, interact with each other. And it dawned on me, well, not on me, it was through my research of other astrologers, that Venus is now rising in the morning, right? Is catching up to the sun. And so she is not visible. And so in some ways she has gone into the underworld, and connected so closely to Mercury, as I'm also learning from other astrologers, is, there is this inner journey now that we are on, especially when it comes to our destiny, our ability to trust in the cosmic cycles, natural law, and the connection that really binds us all, okay? So, but we can't bypass the darkness of us. And this is what the baseline of spiritual alchemy is. And that does require that we are courageous and willing enough to transform and alchemize that darkness and not let it control us. And in this transmission today, we're going to find that if we are not willing to do this, there is going to be a backlash. And there's going to be a backlash anyway, because everybody's in a different place on their journey. But I will assure you that if we are not actually learning from our struggles, if we are not willing to actually get deeper into the structures that underlie our own psyche and make peace with our own darkness and shadow, then our virtue will be nothing more than virtue signaling. And I know that many people that are probably watching this understand what that means. And we're provided with more opportunities to do this work, and it's not easy. It is hard to face those shadow parts of yourself, but this is where we can apply our intuitive knowledge with a moon in Libra to this process, and find inspiration and wisdom in people that have come before us, teachers that have come before us, situations that have come before us where people had to face their own darkness. And we all have to do it. Otherwise, it takes us over, and then we find ourselves acting that out. And this is what happens when we don't actually heal from our trauma. And the Chiron wound is active, active, active. And as we see, Chiron in Aries, it's not going away anytime soon. And so we're all grappling with this wounding of the subjective self and the ego self that really impacts the rest of the cycle unfolding. So let's see here. I'm going to check in with the chat, see how it's going, make sure that everything is going well over on that YouTube side of things. And we will get right into the reading. So let's window capture. I'm going to do this. And we're going to get into the reading. Here we go. Ba-ding. All right. And I'm going to, let's see here. Bring up, oh, no, that's not what I wanted. Bear with me, my friends. All right. Okay, so here is our transmission for today for IMBOLC, and we see that there is, and we're going to go through just like yesterday, we're going to start going through each card and looking at it up close and really getting a sense of the archetypal symbolism here that the tarot is so amazing at, drawing out our own, we know the truth, and it's embedded within each of us, our own guidance, our own intuition, and our own divine nature has every answer that we would ever need. And this is what the Akashic records really represent, is that everything that has been and ever will be is a field of potential that we can access. Okay. So as we're seeing here, that there is at the heart of things the Queen of Swords, right? There's our moon in Libra right there, and flanking her in terms of the experience outside of us is the Six of Wands reversed, the Three of Wands reversed. And so, these numbers 3 and 6 are usually, they're very harmonious, they're very balanced. They show a positive expression of this energy. When we're talking about fire and the wands, it's definitely transformation, spiritual will, creativity, and action. Having these aspects reversed like this on either side of the Queen of Swords today is a really good indication that we are going to be struggling against our willpower and our what we thought was our creative action and transformation. And I'll get into the specifics here. But it's essential that we acknowledge these principles within us for our own spiritual alchemy. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go over a little bit of stuff that I just went into, but I really do want to identify this principle because it's so important to what is going to ultimately come through, what has come through with this message, and I want to transmit to you. We can't bypass the darkness, right? Within us, if we're going to stand in truth. That is part of our truth, is to stand in our own darkness as well as our light, okay? So when we come to the Six of Swords, let's get right into it then. We're going to, the Six of Wands reversed. So here we go. Jupiter and Leo, right? So there's a sense of false victory with this coming into the present moment. The Six of Wands is victory, Jupiter and Libra. And so the idea is that coming out of the 5, we've learned our lessons, right? There was struggle, there was strife, there was action, and there was a sense of trying to express ourselves and to be in our full power. And there was resistance and a lot of fighting. And when we come out of this, there is a sense of victory. Jupiter in Leo. Okay. Now, it's a false victory coming into the moment. So without truly learning the lessons of struggle and strife, the victory has no real meaning. It's hollow. It's just vanity and recklessness, and it is propped up by our ego. Jupiter and Leo can be an incredible regal force of leadership and creative expansion if we're a channel for that divine force to move through us. Otherwise, it's a dangerous and egoic force that really just serves its own ends. And so you can see that coming into the moment here is this vanity and this recklessness and this really just superficial sense of victory that's not actually born out of real struggle and coming to learn our lessons. So that's the energy coming into the moment, okay? So as we get to the Queen of Swords here, wow, look at her. Right? Heads are going to roll, right? Here's our moon in Libra. She is the queen, so she's attached to the emotional element, the water element. You can see that she's high above everything. She's propped up in the sky and the clouds. So there is this detachment from being grounded, but there's also sensitivity and being perceptive, incredibly intelligent, right? She is able to transfer and reflect as being with the queen with the water element, but it also that she's sharp and she has the intellect to really just, you can say, she chopped the head right off, right? Clean break right there. But she is, she's on this throne kind of, and she's got in the background this geometric pattern, and she's really very much, the queen is very much this moon in Libra part of us today, right? Where we can present ourselves with emotional capacity to, like I said, transfer and reflect, and being very sharp and perceptive in our intuition as much as our knowledge. That's the thing. We can apply our knowledge with Libra, but we also, with the moon here, this is about applying that intuitive knowledge, right? Being able to reflect, being able to have, in our psychic awareness to a certain extent, to have discernment, right? She isn't very grounded, so she finds herself, like I said, seated above the clouds in her idealism. That's the thing, because she doesn't have to be grounded in reality. The idealism and just chopping off the head is, is the kind of the center point of this. But she's holding something very important, which is that head. And the queen may be sensitive, but this is why she's allowed, it's precisely what allows her to know when heads need to roll, right? Maybe it's about our head rolling, right? Do we need to disconnect that chattering monkey mind from the rest of us in order to start digging down into our truth, okay? This is at the heart of the matter today. And the court cards represent people, either us, aspects of us, or actual people in our lives. And I would say that we are all on some level interacting with this energy today, okay? So this is the heart of the matter, right? This is where the outside world of cause and effect meets the axis of our energetic power, okay? And is in our heart. This is where those aspects cross over. This is why it's so important to be so open here and very much connected to this, because this is where we get so much information is in this area energetically. So what do we have in our conscious awareness? Well, here is Uriel and the Sphinx. Okay, number 21. So 21 breaking down to 3, we have a very stable aspect, even a pyramid. You can see the pyramid in the background. The Sphinx. Under the Sphinx is where the Akashic records are held, okay? Now, one thing I want to talk about, asteroid Juno, okay? She's in Sagittarius. She's been in the sign of her counterpart because she is the wife of Zeus or Jupiter. So Juno as an archetype represents responsibility and loyalty to our partnerships. And at almost to the point where we almost see, especially with the moon in Libra, like, if you understand Greek and Roman mythology, you'll know that Zeus is always stepping out on Juno, and she is always feeling, but not always, he is always, but she's often feeling betrayed consistently by him in their marriage. She never really steps out on him, but he's always stepping out on her. Now, she has done some things as a result of her anger. Including trying to kill Hercules, right? Because Hercules is the son of Zeus and a mortal woman, right? Same thing with Perseus. Same thing is that he is the progeny of Zeus and another mortal woman. And we know what Perseus, if you ever watched Clash of the Titans, you know what happened to Perseus. They put him and his mother in a coffin and sent them both out to sea because she was pissed. But she accepts him, and they are inadvertently tied to them regardless of what either of them does. This is the same with our own inner polarities. This is important to recognize. We can't really escape the opposing side of us. Even if that side continues to sabotage and betray us, we are inextricably linked with our shadow. So the principles of alchemy and understanding, which are represented by Sagittarius, which is where Juno is, requires an acceptance and a merging of these polarities in order to create something new, or wholeness, understanding. So the sextile to the sun today, Juno sextile to the sun today in Aquarius, suggests that our commitment to understanding ourselves by the real work of getting into the depths of who we are, and this will allow us to upgrade in our collective evolution, which is where the sun, is today. We can go the long way, the organic way, around the mountain, or we can use our spiritual ingenuity and mental efficiency to cut right through our barriers. Although this work is about digging down, it's clear that it is meant to be at the top of our consciousness, which is where we are with this reading, okay? Uriel and the Sphinx. The mysteries of who we are and the depth of who we are is under the Sphinx. Again, the Akashic records are under the Sphinx, according to Edgar Cayce. Whether or not you think it's literal or metaphorical, it doesn't even matter. It's archetypal, and that's just as real as anything else. Now, Uriel is the fire of God, Archangel Uriel. And so we do need courage, will, bravery, and a sense of wanting to transform in order to do the actual work of starting to dig down. And Juno is at the degree of Sagittarius that is the pyramids and the Sphinx, the recognition that there is something much deeper to our cultural and social value systems and to us, right? We're about understanding ourselves right now. And so we have to actually start doing the work. And this is the top of our consciousness. This is where our focus is meant to be today. This is where our power and our awareness is in this process right now. And we have a responsibility and a commitment and a loyalty to the truth, right? Jupiter does represent Sagittarius and the truth, to get down to it, right? And this again goes back to the Libra energy, right? We have to accept both sides of the scales in order to balance them. You don't just bypass one and expect that there's going to be justice or fairness or balance or equality, okay? So our focus and our conscious awareness is on this process right now. And it's very, very supported in terms of the astrology as well. So what is at the root of all of this is fascinating. So this is the Four of Forces, and it's reversed. So we have a dichotomy again. The forces are also the fire in the Akashic Tarot. We have the spring when it's upright, and when it's reversed like this, we have autumn, right? The harvest. So at the root of this, what is energetically rooting us? What is energetically in the subconscious? What is it that is rooting us, but is something that we're not fully aware of necessarily? Well, it's pretty simple. We reap what we sow. What we don't see, but is very much active in the realm of the subconscious, is this harvest of what we have sown and cultivated. As we put the effort in to dig deeper, we start to pull up what has been buried down there. We start to gather the results of our actions. This is what's happening. This is what's rooting us right now. We may not like what we are gathering, and oh boy, there's going to be a lot of not liking it. Even for those who are actively doing this, many people are still not. If we are to be honest with ourselves. However, we can still live with appreciation of this process because we now can evaluate this process to determine where we can make changes, where we can see ourselves for who we are, right? Acknowledge our shadow as much as we acknowledge our light. It's time to be real with ourselves and to be, real with what we are harvesting. There's no way we can bypass that. That is what it is. The reality is that this process is not going to go over very well for those who are not aligned with full awareness and appreciation of this entire process. Even if we are, there's still the possibility that we're going to recognize that we may have overestimated ourselves and confused true virtue and responsibility with virtue signaling and the conceit that accompanies that. In fact, I would expect clear displays of rudeness and conceit and pride in response to the rotten harvest that many will not want to take responsibility for. And we see this very clearly right here in the Three of Wands. This is the cause and effect outcome of this horizontal axis here. The sun in Aries. So Aries is about the individual subjective experience, our will and our bravery. It is the territory of Mars, who is really not enjoying being in Taurus right now. Although now is releasing some of the baggage and starting to embrace more of a natural and almost playful quality, which I think will really help this process as well. Not to take things so seriously, to be willing to see it as a play and playful as opposed to so serious and action-oriented and action hero-oriented. Virtue is about our own virtue, right? The responsibility of creating ourselves. And again, it's a 3. So usually this is very balanced when it's upright. So again, when it's reversed like this, is rudeness and conceitedness and overestimating ourselves. Virtue signaling is a big one because it's about us. Aries is about our ego consciousness and our subjective experience, our actualization of ourselves. it's not gonna go over so well, and you're gonna see a lot of pushback to this process being brought out to the public in some way, shape, or form. Even if we're going through this in our own way, like I said, it's not going to go, we can even feel the pushback. This is part of the work, right? We don't want to, it's not so easy to see the places where you have supported your own, where you have not acknowledged your own shadow, therefore bypassing it, which means you're actually it's controlling you. And then you think that you're doing something righteous and virtuous when really what you're doing is just playing out your own shadow and your trauma, thinking that you are doing something virtuous. This is really where this is headed. Even with the action of going down deep, we still are harvesting no matter what. It's just whether or not we're doing it consciously and with a sense of wanting to transform and getting to the root of who we are. Okay. So digging down through the rock-like substance of our beliefs and our values to the Akashic records that are hidden under the Sphinx, as I said, according to Edgar Cayce, it takes a lot of work. We need spiritual will and courage to do it. However, another force that is able to change the material landscape without losing any of its power is water. And here we get into the guidance of the reading. There we go. There's the waterfall, the 6 of forces. Now it is water, but again, forces. There's a lot of fire. There's a lot of action in this reading today, okay? We each have the ability to move and shape any situation in a way that honors us and our life moving forward with the power of our feelings. Deep emotions can transform any situation. So we can take the imagery of the waterfall as guidance if we need to gather our power for this process. So, I mean, if you are familiar with the process of fracking, that's exactly what they do. They shoot water down under the ground to make these tunnels, right? To make these pathways to get to the natural gas. So there is so much power behind our emotions. And again, the application of our intuitive knowledge. And it can be as powerful as we need it to be, to get down under, like to break away, to erode the actual rock that is built up over time, over the deeper belief systems and truths, okay? And they solidify over time to the point where we think that that is reality. So we're also being guided today by the cardinal. All right, let's show you the cardinal. The polarities of your spiritual pursuits and your physical pleasures are out of balance. So do whatever is necessary to bring them back into equilibrium. Again, here we are again talking about the shadow and the polarity and balance in the equilibrium, okay? So when the cardinal shows up, it's often about, as a spirit animal, showing that there's angelic or ancestral guidance around us, okay? But it also is talking about the integration of the spiritual and the material, so the polarities of the self. And this can assist in this process, okay? If we're too caught up in this idealized aspect of spirituality, we won't allow ourselves to even acknowledge the material aspect of being human and that there's even anything that we need to dig down into. We're just like so high and mighty, just like the Queen of Swords. That's something to keep in mind. We're sitting on this high horse of like, I have it all figured out spiritually. In fact, I'm going to judge everybody else around me as a result. But in the same fashion, if we don't acknowledge ourselves as spiritual beings, then at all, and become entangled in a purely physical world, material world, let's be real, that's the doorway to Satanism, right? We've talked about this before, of Capricorn, and how if you stop at Capricorn at the zenith of your chart, if that's where you stop, then that is what you worship. That is it for you. And so you become so entangled in the world of the senses and the material that you mistake them for God. Right? And this is problematic. This is very problematic. And you can see this, how it has manifested so much in our world and what that leads to. Okay, so we have to get balanced by acknowledging these two aspects of ourselves again, and accepting that they exist and finding a way to integrate them. Okay, this is what the cardinal is representing. Now, when it comes to the harvest, it seems to me that it's important that we are determined in our practices, okay? Like this mouse here, this is about reading the body language. This is about paying attention to the details. You're overlooking some important details. Pay closer attention. Maybe we're not really looking at what we're pulling up. Maybe we're just like pulling it all up and not looking at the quality of what we have cultivated and reaped. Maybe we're not taking a closer look at what it is that led to, maybe it's rotten. Maybe there is some sort of problem with what we have grown. Maybe we are not getting the picture here. It's important that we don't overlook these details, and like the mouse, we have to get very discerning and fine-tune that aspect that is able to hear the more subtle messages, okay? And this is what the mouse, how it survives. The mouse is able to be very aware of its environment in order to survive, and does pick up on subtle cues in order to do that. Perhaps allowing ourselves to be more sensitive to the subtle messages that are coming in rather than always projecting outward can really support in this process. Something to consider here is that communication is a two-way street, and the messenger, the Archangel Gabriel, number 3, right? Here's some more. There's a lot of potential balance here today. It's just not in the places we may think. Gabriel, as much as it's about divine expression and has the crest of Mercury, it goes both ways, and hearing the message is just as important. And sometimes it's really, really subtle. And if we are too busy projecting outwards or being, or not paying attention to what we're doing, we miss the message. And maybe there's something to be learned here that we aren't getting because we're so caught up in other aspects. So perhaps allowing ourselves to be more sensitive to the subtle messages that are coming in will support us. Because once we harvest, there's no going back, right? You don't get to do it over again. The only pathway is forward to a new cycle. And Libra is the time of harvest. Virgo into Libra is the harvest time. And so in some ways, that Queen of Swords cutting the head off is kind of like cutting the wheat from the chaff, right? We are harvesting the grain. We're harvesting everything that we have cultivated. And there's no going back. You don't get to reverse the cycle. You only move forward in terms of the cycle going one way. So we want to be sure we're getting the most out of this process, regardless of what we're gathering. And that may mean that we are more aware, or we should be more aware, or we can try to be more aware of what we've participated in cultivating. We have to take responsibility for this entire process. And we may need to quiet ourselves, quiet our minds, diminish the chatter, and keep doing that work of going within in order to maybe pick up on some pieces, because we all have work to do. Again, remember what I talked about, if you have stuck in this spiritual idealism, I see so many people on social media that are spiritual teachers, intuitives, channels, whatever, and most of them are constantly telling other people what they should or shouldn't be doing, acting as if they are on, and they mean well. And a lot of times what they are saying is not inaccurate and it's good guidance, but you can tell that we all have work to do and we have all participated in this process. And so if you really, really want to connect to your own personal virtue, then we all have to take the time to dig in deeper to who we are and our shadow so that we can integrate it and be a whole person, as opposed to getting caught in being one side or the other, because you cannot bypass your own shadow. And I really hesitate to say this because I don't want to make it seem like I don't appreciate other people who are teachers and truth tellers. But the people screaming this the loudest probably have a lot of work to do themselves, like screaming it and being like, you need to do this. Everybody else that's, part of this, whatever, we all have the work to do, all of us, and it never ends really. But I would say that if you really want to get out ahead of how much it's going to, the backlash on personal responsibility, I would say that this is a great time. This is a great time to allow yourself to sink in into those spaces within yourself and acknowledge the darkness. You need that. That is the space where new creation happens, and you can't bypass it. Otherwise, you're just feeding false light, and that's not natural law. That's not God's law. So that's the transmission for today, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining me. I am so appreciative of every single one of you. If you're interested in a reading, you can book at the website. That's in the description box below. There's intuitive readings. There are astrology, starseed readings, and then Reiki and energy work as well. That has been really powerful, even distance work. So thank you for being here. If you're catching this on the replay, that's awesome too. And don't forget to subscribe and like, and possibly even share this video if you think other people will get something out of it. I don't want to get caught up in like, I'm losing subscribers, because it doesn't really matter, but it does feel a little bit targeted because it's a consistent, one a day. And that feels weird to me. And so, I'm not saying that people do it all the time. I unsubscribe to old stuff and subscribe to new stuff, and what we resonate with changes. It's a fluid experience. It's dynamic. But if you value this, definitely subscribe and hit the like button, because it helps get the message out there. Happy IMBOLC, everybody. Enjoy the halfway point to the spring equinox. Happy Groundhog's Day. Give yourself an opportunity to laugh at at Bill Murray. Because that's what he's here to do, is to be the fool in some ways. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for the transmission. Take care of yourselves. And I am out of here. Bye.